Raccoon City had a population of over 100,000 people. Umbrella Corporation employed roughly a third of them. They also, through a sequence of decisions that would make any insurance underwriter quit on the spot, contaminated the city's drinking water with a mutagenic virus, triggered a full citywide outbreak, and then watched the United States government bomb the entire city into rubble to contain it. Their immediate response was to send collection teams into the wreckage to recover their own samples. And today, we're talking about how a company that sold aspirin and wound cream quietly built a bioweapon empire, a private military, and a eugenics project that kept all three hidden inside a Fortune 500 balance sheet for 35 years. So, let's go back to the very beginning, because every catastrophic corporate failure has an origin story. And this one starts with something that sounds almost academic. Three guys, Oswell Spencer, Edward Ashford, and James Marcus. University classmates, virologists, all of them, in some capacity, associated with the eugenics movement. The kind of men who looked at human civilization and thought, someone should be in charge of improving it. And then critically decided that someone was them. Spencer has a dream. The dream is, use a virus to birth a new race of superhumans and then rule over them as gods. That's it. That's the whole business plan. Now, to fund a scheme like that, you do need some money. Serious money, so Spencer does what any rational person would when confronted with an ambition that size. He starts a pharmaceutical company. Legitimate revenue up front, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, consumer goods. Respectable. Boring, even. The kind of company that sponsors health fairs and prints its logos on water bottles. Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, 1968. The official mission: health, wellness, a better life for all. Actual mission: find a mutagenic virus in West Africa, weaponize it, sell it to militaries, and use the revenue to genetically engineer a master race. And here's the thing, it almost worked. Spencer had already learned from his mentor that the human body could be fundamentally transformed by the right biological agent. Then, in 1966, Marcus developed a hypothesis about a mythical West African follower called the Stairway of the Sun, supposedly capable of granting extraordinary abilities through viral infection. They found it in an underground garden in Indipaya tribal lands. They extracted the virus within it and named it the Progenitor virus. And then, because restraint was not a founding value of Umbrella, they immediately started developing weapons from it. What they eventually produced, the T-virus, didn't just kill the infected. It kept them functional, mobile, aggressive, cannibalistic, dead, but active. The military application was obvious. The part where this would be fundamentally, catastrophically impossible to control once released into an ecosystem was apparently not concerning enough to slow them down. So they kept going. And here's what keeping going actually looked like operationally. Umbrella had a shipping company, the Porteous Line Company. It transported passengers across the Atlantic. It also transported viral weapon samples from West Africa. They owned ocean liners, the Queen Zenobia, the Queen Dido, the Queen Semiramis, with a dedicated Antarctic transport terminal that had originally been built for legitimate research and was quietly converted into an operational bioweapons shipping depot. They had a tourism arm, a medical equipment division, consumer products, cosmetics. The whole operation was an enormous, legally airtight shell game designed to funnel money towards secret underground labs on multiple continents, while their public-facing subsidiaries sold you aspirin and told you to have a nice day. And the labs, well, they needed protecting, so they built a private military. 3 of them, actually. The Umbrella Security Service handled internal security. The Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service was deployed specifically to handle escaped bioweapons, and the fact that they needed a standing army for this tells you everything about how frequently escaped bioweapons were considered an operational reality worth planning for. Then there were the monitors, secret police assigned exclusively to report on rogue employees and ensure nobody talked. The rogue employee problem was, apparently, again, significant enough to warrant their own dedicated intelligence division. By the early 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, They were actively contracting mercenaries from communist guerrilla groups and retired Warsaw Pact soldiers. Their air arm included Black Hawks, AH-6 attack helicopters, and C-130 Hercules transports. Their ground forces carried M4 rifles and MP5 submachine guns. They had a private boot camp on Rockford Island for anti-bioweapon training. This was not a pharmaceutical company with an aggressive HR policy. This was a pharmaceutical company that had quietly become a sovereign paramilitary state with better equipment than most actual governments. And when things went wrong, which I think as we all know they did constantly, they didn't call regulators. They called the UBCS. In West Africa, when a facility suffered an outbreak, the cleanup involved a massacre of everyone in the nearby town, covered up by the local government, which was either bribed or simply didn't have the leverage to push back. In the Arklay Mountains, a hospital experiment went catastrophically sideways. No police investigation followed, and the facility just closed in 1993 like a restaurant that got a bad health inspection. A journalist who started asking questions in 1996 was murdered and dumped in the Ames River. This is the actual umbrella business model. Not the aspirin, not the wound cream. The real model is run experiments, cause disasters, deploy your private army, make all the evidence disappear, replace the carpets, and file absolutely nothing in writing. The only problem with a model like that is that eventually you run out of things to disappear. By 1998, Umbrella had embedded moles in the US military. They had facilities on multiple continents. They were selling weapons to governments worldwide. A third of Raccoon City's 100,000 residents worked for one of their subsidiaries. The company was, by any reasonable measure, untouchable. They were also about to lose everything because two of their own scientists decided to betray them at the exact same time, without coordinating with each other in ways that catastrophically compounded. First, Albert Wesker, Umbrella's man inside STARS, the special law enforcement unit that Umbrella itself was funding specifically to have a controllable local police presence. Wesker had already decided, with the cold, analytical detachment of someone who had worked there long enough to see how the story ended, that Umbrella was doomed. So, instead of following orders to send his team into a bioweapons incident in the Arklay Mountains and left them to die while he collected combat data, he faked his own death in the explosion, took the research, and walked away. Second, simultaneously, Dr. William Birkin, the architect of the G-Virus, Umbrella's most important scientist and the man behind their most promising biological achievement, a strain capable of repairing dead tissue, theoretically capable of transforming a human being into something far beyond one. Birkin had spent years trying to get into Spencer's inner circle. It never happened. So he made a different decision. Defect to the US military, hand over samples of both the T-Virus and G-Virus, and let them deal with it. When Umbrella found out, they sent a security team. The security team shot him, and he still had a sample in his coat, of which he injected into himself. And then, what used to be Dr. William Birkin tore through the entire security team, destroyed the case they'd stolen, and ruptured the sample canisters into the sewer system beneath Raccoon City. The T-Virus spread to the rats reached Victory Lake, Raccoon City's reservoir, and the reservoir contaminated the drinking water. By mid-September, Raccoon General Hospital was under quarantine for what early reports were calling a cannibal disease. By late September, the UBCS deployment sent to manage the situation was wiped out within hours of arrival. Federal troops pulled back to the perimeter blockade and stopped letting anyone out. An influential government official named Derek Simmons activated a contingency plan. They bombed the city. A fuel-air bomb. 100,000 people, and Umbrella's response to learning that an American city had been destroyed, partly because of their virus, partly because of their rogue scientist, partly because their security team shot a man who was holding a sample of the most dangerous biological agent on the planet. They dispatched teams to collect their own G-Virus samples from the wreckage. You would think that, bombing a city would be enough to end a company. It almost wasn't. Congress suspended Umbrella USA's rights to do business and federalized its assets. The president resigned over public fallout from the bombing. Umbrella lost its main American facilities overnight, and then they spent 4 years fighting the legal case anyway. Their defense was essentially, prove it. Raccoon City was destroyed, but the evidence was destroyed with it. They brought in false witnesses, they argued that the US government was the real party responsible, pointing to the military's own involvement in the chaos. They attacked the credibility of survivors who testified, including former employees Yoko Suzuki and Linda Baldwin, who went on record against their own former employer. For 4 years, it was working. Until Wesker, apparently having decided he'd let them squirm long enough, made a quiet deal with the court and handed over excerpts from Umbrella's own internal archives. Their direct involvement in the Raccoon City incident, documented in their own words, in their own files. The evidence was not made public. US interests required that, but it was enough. Verdict against Umbrella, bankruptcy filed immediately. The corporation and Umbrella Pharmaceuticals collapsed together. Spencer went off into hiding, with both American and Russian intelligence agencies now actively hunting him. Their Japanese subsidiary held on until March of 2004, then went into liquidation when no company in Japan was willing to touch the name. 35 years, 3 founding scientists, a eugenics project nobody outside the executive circle even knew existed. Dozens of secret facilities across 4 continents, a private military contracted from the ruins of the Soviet Union, ocean liners running bioweapons across the Atlantic, and the complete, documented destruction of a medium-sized American city. Over. Except, well, their research data had already been downloaded by Wesker before the facility fell. Their viruses were already circulating on the black market through rogue employees who had been quietly feeding samples out for years. Their African facility, the original Progenitor site, the place where all of this started, had been acquired by a new company called Trial. Umbrella didn't die, it simply dispersed. The aspirin company that secretly wanted to build gods quietly became everyone else's problem. But is there a version of this where any of it gets properly reckoned with? Drop your answers down in the comments below. Stay safe, don't drink the tap water, and if a multinational conglomerate offers you a wound cream that works suspiciously well, maybe ask what else they make.